Are you a college student working a minimum wage job and going to classes? Minimum wage has been a big thing for the United States the last several years. There have been many debates on whether it should be raised or not. The saddest thing about minimum wage is it isn't something you're going to fix overnight. There are several things that are good, and there's others that are not so good about it. Many people who live in lower areas around the city do not think the minimum wage is enough to provide for their families and children, even when both parents are working or even have multiple jobs. The federal minimum wage as of today is $7.25 an hour and hasn't been increased since July 1st of 2009, according to Allison. Working a full-time job with the current wage, an individual is only bringing in around $15,000 a year. This is before everything else like overtime and holiday pay, if that individual even gets those benefits that are offered to them, but also before the huge amount of taxes that they'll have to pay will be taken out as well. As of today, 14.8% of Americans are living in or near the poverty level, as the population is around 46.7 million people living below the poverty line as of 2016, according to Ballotpedia, which is an annual income of $24,250 for a family of four, according to the U.S. Census Bureau, meaning that a parent working full-time at minimum wage are way below the poverty line. Even parents having income come in full-time with this salary, having this total earning, they're above the poverty line. They still tend to struggle with other things they have to deal with, like uncertainty of medical conditions or any sort of emergency that might come up. As of September 13, 2011, the nation's poverty rate rose 15.1% in 2010, according to the poverty threshold. Since minimum wage is beginning to be considered too low for today's prices, the only solution for this would be to raise the minimum wage federally, according to Minsimer. Jennifer Romwich is a professor of the School of Social Work at University of Washington, and she published an article of social work in a journal on August 2nd, 2017. In this essay, she talked about how all of this can connect to social work. She also talked about the advantages and disadvantages it would have if the minimum wage was raised. A raise in minimum wage could lead to solutions that will positively help families. It could have a reduction on the poverty level in the United States, making more people better off, both financially and emotionally, due to being satisfied. When people, such as the source for food, water, and a place to live are satisfied, and many families can begin focusing on extra expenses, making sure their kids get a good education, getting to go on vacations or family trips. This would be a huge boost in enjoyment of the family's lives. The United States could grow economically with a raised minimum wage, especially when employers are paying more and contributing to overall wealth. In Romwich's article, she says to see workers reap a great portion of our economy's growth and wealth. The minimum wage is an allowable approach for shifting the distribution of earnings. It seems that the minimum wage would be the most effective observation to shifting the income gap in a positive way, indirectly helping low-income families. Another article, Stephanie Minsimer writes about Catherine Eden's experience of living around and observing low-income single fathers in certain areas. Eden later wrote a book about all of this, and Minsimer described that as a number of the men in Eden's book dropped out of high school or college so that they could work low-wage jobs to provide for their children, giving up on bigger opportunities that would have helped them become better providers for their children. Many of them actually turned to selling drugs because it's better pay than the job that they're actually doing. Sadly, many families in the United States are forced to make very difficult decisions like this every single day. There are choices between buying food, paying rent, clothing, education, medical expenses, etc. Increasing minimum wage could lead to better and more opportunities for both parents and children. Parents then wouldn't feel that they have to do risky things to make cash for their children, and their children would have a better chance of making it to post-secondary education. Children who come from lower income families usually will find themselves stuck in the lower class because they work part-time jobs throughout high school to help pay for bills, which will make them fall behind in their classes. If they do happen to do well in high school while making a job, they may not be able to realistically consider attending college because it's financially impossible for them. I worked part-time while I was in high school and received a check every single Friday that was usually around $200 a week. I had some friends that worked other jobs that made much more than me, and it was frustrating at times, but luckily I had parents to support me if there wasn't anything else that I could do. The job was just so that I didn't get bored all the time and I had a little extra change to do things that I wanted. Nothing like I didn't have to pay for rent or try to help my family put food on the table. Even though it seems like raising minimum wage is an acceptable solution, there are many problems that don't ever get spoken about, but are very crucial to consider. A negative example is that many people think if we would raise minimum wage, it could cause many people to lose their jobs because the companies wouldn't be able to make enough money to keep the company running while paying their employees more. Therefore, the increase in minimum wage would lead to the decrease in jobs in the United States, which was said by Mensimer. Romwich also says that, quote, having an increase in minimum wage is likely to reduce the poverty level, end quote. Some may think that increasing the minimum wage would have a direct effect on people living in poverty. When considering everything else, it makes a lot of sense because a small increase would not result in a huge impact. As you can see, there are many effects that can be caused by raising minimum wage, and it would be positive. In other areas, it could be negative. So in conclusion, to all of this, the question should be minimum wage should be raised can still go unanswered for many years. In the Social Work Journal by Romwich, she states, having higher wages alone will only benefit to some workers. To ensure more widespread well-being, supporters should push for politics to uphold employment through job programs and to increase worker rights for fair and predictable compensation and schedules. Having this quote in mind, there are many different angles and viewpoints that need to be considered when finding a solution. Even though I continue to advocate for an increase in minimum wage, I can still value the viewpoint from both sides of the spectrum and would be able to respectively discuss probable outcomes to solve this issue. Thank you for listening.